little bit different. Well, the first two, and then the last three are a clump together.
Right.
But let's dive right in, and we're going to take a look at a very solid game to start with. And I've had this come up a lot, especially in my Master of the French Defense course on Chessable, where I'm asked in the exchange variation. I in fact, had a few paragraphs worth of conversation with a 1600 rated player recently, and he's just like, I'm frustrated with the lines. Not that the theory's bad, but it's so tough to win with black from some dry positions.
Right.
And I think a lot of people will discredit solid openings and get, sometimes I just want a game. I am not a traditional E4 player, and the four knights, I mean, it's probably arguably one of the drier ways to play E4, E5. But there's a particular variation I like, which is the Glek variation. And the thing about this variation, if you're a King's Indian aficionado, say, for instance, the sideline here, bishop c5, bishop g2. Notice the structural orientation here. You essentially have a King's Indian. The only difference is the placement of this knight. And certain players just enjoy playing certain structures over and over and over. I'm definitely one of those guys. I have a handful of structures I like, and I like to get at them all the time. So let's come back to the main game. And my opponent definitely went with the most ambitious move here. Respect. And we're getting a structure that is, normally you see white having this type of piece set up. It's like an English attack, colors reversed.
Right.
Against the Sicilian.
Playing like F6
So
and
it's
stuff.
a very, very fluid and great way to develop. Queen can come to d7. You have the ability to castle queenside. The bishop on f8 is flexible to where he can go. And then you can look to absolutely throw all of your kingside pawns. Now, understanding this, I do not have an aggressive structure with white. I can't fling pawns easily, especially because of the location of my knight on c3. So I need to make sure that his attack is never going to get going. So let's keep it going. I'm just going to castle. Bishop e7. Rook e1. Tickle, tickle on that e5 pawn. Getting a little concession. So a normal move that is played here, knight takes c3 and b takes c3. So I like a little bit of back and forth. So let's ask Coach Matt in the situation. B takes c3. Is this a concession or is it a strength in the position? What do you think?
I mean, it really depends on what you do with it, because you are doubling your C pawns, and you isolated your A pawn. However, you did build your center. It is a much stronger center. Now, my thought here, if you can get it in, would be d3 and c4 and try to control the light square bishop.
Okay. That's definitely some ideas. Now, the theme about these particular double pawns is the same theme that exists in Sicilians. So let me go back to the beginning, and let's say I'll just go with a knight c6 Sicilian. And right here, let's do a null move. I'll even go, let's say, an accelerated dragon or something, g6.
Okay.
This situation is a mutually detrimental situation. Neither knight wants to capture each other. If black was to capture, this is free and easy development because the queen can't be bothered. And you can bring the queen out early if she's not being attacked. But in this case, after g6, if the knight takes, when the b pawn takes, it strengthens the ability to hit the center and it opens a b file for attacking. So this is the same type of pawn structure or same idea. So even though it's a double pawn, I still have all those benefits of a stronger center to hit and then the open b file to attack with.
Okay.
So let's come back to the main game with b takes c3. And this is why, like I talk about structure, there's certain ideas that will overlap in structure. So even though it doesn't look exactly the same, it is the same theme that is going on here. And now I'm not worried at all about black trying to castle queenside because I've got the open file to be able to attack with quite quickly.
Right.
So moving forward, f6.
May I also ask a question? Would that
Sure,
further
absolutely.
say that because you know they're going to castle kingside, more likely, they're not going to do a pawn storm idea against your king.
Yep, and that makes me completely safe, and I'm right at home in a positional type game where I can slowly build pressure.
Gotcha.
So these are the types of games that I typically prefer because you can control everything and strive for excellence in the position, if you will. Now, here is a matter of technique, and I played D3 in the game because theoretically, I'm used to seeing that type of structure from these positions. But I would say the more accurate move is the more forcing D4, following up on the theme that I just discussed. So I will note that every game that we're going to be taking a look at tonight are 3-minute games. So to evaluate, at a master level too deeply in these games would be, I think, a mistake. But, we do what we can.
Right.
D4 would be more accurate because of the problem of that E6 bishop not being guarded. And we get a situation where we pile in the pressure, clip, clip, clip. And here's the great part. If he takes with a B, F4, and you got problems. And if he takes the other way, after bishop takes B7, we net a pawn. So we can pretty clearly see how D4 is a straightforward path to a much better position for white.
Right.
But I decided to go with a solid, tried and tested D3. My opponent castles. Only square, really, that you can justify that the bishop has even a modicum of activity. Queen D7. The optimal piece placement for black. But what's his plan? See, that's the thing that gets me. I will often have players, and it happens in my chessable courses all the time, they'll get to a position and go, well, what's the other side's plan here? And what do you think? What would you say that black's plan? He's completed development. I'll even give you an extra move here with black. What would you do?
It'd be very nice to play the pawn storm at F5, F4, trying to crack at your kingside structure, but I don't know. I feel like that pawn on E5 might just not be able to withstand that.
Right, and like with the bishop on E7, typically you want it on D6 if you're going for that type of idea.
Okay.
And if we're not going for a center break, if we're not going for a kingside pawn storm, well, are we pushing pawns on the queen side? I don't really see it there either.
Probably black's idea should be to trade into an endgame with a better pawn structure, but white probably won't allow that.
So one of the main ideas here is if bishop H3 to try to trade, I'm going to go bishop H1 and refuse trades. So those are the types of ideas that you're looking for, but you hit it spot on.
Okay.
Black does have the superior pawn structure. And if we traded everything off except the kings, that is a pretty solid advantage, dare I say win. So I would need to avoid that at all costs. So I'm looking for dynamic play. I go knight D2. And I'm just looking to bounce around in the position. Maybe my knight comes to E4. If you gave me a few moves, I'm going to go knight E4, knight C5, and I'm trying to net the bishop pair by attacking the queen and bishop at the same time.
Right.
My opponent goes bishop A3 and makes a not so subtle little threat here. Bishop B2 hitting the rook and the C3 pawn. So we need to do something about that. Very obvious. Rook B1, get on that open B file. Put the question to the B7 pawn. My opponent goes B6. And now this is a critical moment. Everything in the game so far has been pretty standard, pretty boring, but this game stuck out to me and I really enjoyed it because of my evaluation of this position right here. So what is White's plan and what should you do here? Because this is make or break.
Good question. I honestly don't know of a good plan in this position.
Okay, so we got a problem with our A2 pawn.
Yeah. My initial thought was to play C4, but it just doesn't feel like it's doing anything in the position.
Yeah, if C4, probably I'm going to try to play for e4 at some point and undermine the structure.
Okay. Other than that, I guess to stop them taking our a2 pawn, knight c4, but that triples our pawns.
And see, that's the thing. Just saying triple pawns, it seems like blasphemy. It seems like, something's wrong when a chess player is like tripled pawns.
Tripled isolated pawns.
It feels bad. But as I play knight c4, I'm evaluating the fact that these triple pawns are actually going to be a pain in the deal with. And I'm getting the B pair in the meantime. So he goes right for it. How often are they good? Let's see one of those rare occasions where I can make triple pawns look good.
Mm-hmm.
Queen takes, rook takes. So I got
this is pretty nice.
An open file and some B's to work with here. So my opponent actually says, all right, I see what's going on here. Your B's are good. Knight a5. I'm going to go after your pawns. And this was one of those times I saw the potential of the double pawns. I didn't even want the exchange. But if you just take the exchange, question, which piece is better, the bishop on g2 or the rook on a8?
The bishop on g2.
Right now, the bishop on g2, but the dynamic potential of the rook long term is stronger.
Right.
So most people would miss this minor finesse. Check and then take if you're going to take, because we're in an endgame and we force the king one square further away for any endgame. And that causes black just that much more of a problem. And then simply c5 with the same type of plan that you'll see in the game. Rook d7 to follow, and white will win this position easy. Mm-hmm. But I saw how strong the Bs were going to be, and sometimes from a positional standpoint, I can't help myself. So c5 immediately, and I keep the tension in the position. Mm-hmm. My opponent goes rook b8, and this was the position I was envisioning when I did not capture the rook. I saw the bishop d5 check idea and knew that would be good enough, but I wanted everything.
And I wanted actually, the more actually, just this position right here is just like, what can black do?
Cry.
Like putting a knight on b7, it's kind of sad. You might take it and help like make the rook look silly. You might not. He's kind of trapped behind the wall. The bishop's
and
stuck.
Like if he tries to defend laterally with rook f7, you got bishop d5 with the pin.
This is ridiculous.
So the only way to really defend c7 is this very awkward and painful rook fc8 move.
So if I may ask a question here,
sure.
If this is not strictly speaking endgame though, it's more like late middle game?
I don't know. This is always something depending upon who you ask.
Okay.
Like some people define an endgame as anytime the queens come off the board, but that makes for an awkward conversation when a pawn promotes. Well, what about just queens? Queen versus queen. Is that an endgame? Yeah, it's an endgame to me. Mm-hmm. So I have trouble defining when the middle game stops and the end game begins. Okay. There's a blur there. But yeah, this is a good question. So here, I saw the potential of the c-pawn phalanx. You don't get to see that very often. Mm-hmm. Moving forward in unison. They're all going to work together. So first, we're going to cement the structure.
So rude.
and start, gradually just turning the screw. This is going to be painful. Bishop d6, okay. Check. And now we've anchored the B.
That knight has nowhere to go.
That's the deal. You want to trade, sir? Okay. There's one of my pawns. And I missed this. Rook b5 wins on the spot. I saw this idea. I was preparing it, but that's a nice one. So I actually played rook takes first, c4, because the knight can't go anywhere. It can't get out. Mm-hmm. And after g6, rook b5, black had enough, and I don't blame him. So wanted to start things off with that focus on, can triple pawns be good? Maybe so, maybe so. So that's our first of the games, and next one we'll go a little bit quicker through the opening phase as